Okay, great. Shall I go ahead and read the script? All right. Good morning, everyone. I am Laura Shaughnessy. I serve as chair of the Professional Advisory Committee of the Kansas Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. I ask the members of the advisory committee to respond by roll call to signify their presence at this open meeting that is being conducted remotely by conference call and other electronic medium. Leslie Suister, is she here?
She is actually not going to be attending due to her role as board chair, so that she doesn't interfere with the advisory committee recommendations.
Terrific, thank you. Kenneth Huey?
Here.
Bob Kircher?
Here.
Kenton Olaf?
Here.
Gary Price? Elaine Tachik? I can never say her name right. Elaine Tachik? Not here. Andrew Secor? Not present. So how many members does that mean we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that correct?
There are currently 4 members right now.
4. Okay. And that's enough for us to conduct our work.
We'll need one more for any recommendations by the advisory committee, because that would be, there's currently 8 members of the advisory committee.
And you have. Okay.
4, so.
So does that mean, do we go ahead then and do, well, let me finish reading and we'll come back to that. I note the following staff members are also present. David Fye, Leslie Allen, Ashley Van Boosberg.
Here.
Next, David Fye will read a message concerning this meeting being held remotely.
This is David Fye, Executive Director for the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. Public comment allows the public to address the advisory committee about its concerns, but the Kansas Open Meeting Act, or COMA, does not require the advisory committee to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals. Individuals requesting to provide public comment could contact the executive director prior to the meeting by sending an email to david@ks.gov. Getting a little bit of an echo. So you can send an email to david.fye@ks.gov. There'll be no public comment at the meeting today, as no individuals requested to provide public comment. Because we're conducting a meeting remotely by conference call and other teleconference ability, I state for the record the following information. The meeting is being conducted remotely. However, access to the meeting is being conducted by medium of interactive communication that allows members of the public without cost to attend the meeting through the use of conference call and on the board's YouTube channel. While the meeting is conducted remotely, the requirements of the COMA are not suspended. We're going to be conducting the meeting according to COMA and allow individuals to attend it through the use of the YouTube channel. And while the meeting is being conducted remotely, the requirements of COMA are not suspended. As such, we'll be conducting this meeting pursuant to COMA. On September 20th, 2021, we sent notice of the advisory committee meeting to all individuals who had requested notice of the advisory committee meetings. The notice was also posted on the board's website at ksbsrb.ks.gov, and you may obtain a copy of the notice at that website. An agenda and other meeting materials will be posted to the board's website on the day of the meeting, and those have been posted. You may also request a copy of the agenda by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov with the subject line "Request for the agenda," and it will be sent to you. The notice contains information for the conference call and YouTube channel that allows the public to attend the meeting free of charge. The notice also states that if there are any technical issues during the meeting, you can call the board's office at 785-296-3240. Due to current conditions right now, we'd recommend that instead you send an email to bsrb@ks.gov. And a recording of the meeting will be available on the BSRB YouTube channel following the conclusion of the meeting by using the link to the meeting on the agenda.
The meeting is now called to order, and the advisory committee will begin its discussion of the first item on its agenda. So the first item, opening remarks. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for your time. I know you're all busy. I also wanted to mention that since our last meeting, Leslie Suister has been elected as the BSRB president, and she's not here today, so we can congratulate her, but I just wanted you all to know. We need agenda approval from our August meeting, and I need to know if anybody has anything they want to add to the agenda or any edits from the meeting notes. I need to start over. We need to approve this agenda. I'm looking at two things. So does anybody have anything they want to add to this agenda for this meeting? Okay, so I need a motion to approve the agenda for this meeting.
Well, and Laura, actually, that's an item that really doesn't vote. As long as there's no issues, that should be fine.
Okay, so we can just skip it. Okay, let's go to the minutes. So August 2nd minutes. I need anybody have any questions or any edits to the minutes from August 2nd? Okay, so I do need a motion for that to approve the meetings for the August 2nd meeting.
Yeah, and Laura, actually, I got a message from Elaine. Elaine will be joining us here in a little bit. You may want to lay a vote on the minutes until Elaine can join, and then.
Okay. Okay, so she'll be in a minute.
She sent a message that said she would be joining the meeting here shortly. So
terrific. Okay, so then let's go ahead. Can we go ahead and go to your executive director's report?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. I'll go ahead and let the advisory committee members know about a few other items as Laura Wester is the new chair of the board and David Anderson is the new vice chair. In terms of overall updates, and we are getting a little bit of feedback. If you don't mind, you can just go ahead and mute your microphone unless you're talking. I wanted to let you all know that there was a former executive director of the BSRB, Mary Ann Gable. She had served as executive director for the BSRB for about 20 years, from about 1980 to just about 2000. She passed away on September 1st of 2021. So we went ahead and sent flowers to her visitation, and just wanted to highlight her and her work that she had done for the agency. Another item I wanted to make you aware of. So we did end the fiscal year on June 30th of 2021. That ended fiscal year 2021. And we were asked to provide a budget estimate, a new budget request for fiscal years 2022 and also 2023. We were also asked to provide summary information on the agency and some information on performance measures related to the agency. So that was something that I've been working on quite a bit in September, and that was submitted by the deadline on September 15th. So our budget request has been submitted. And just to let you know a little bit about the process, that is currently being reviewed by individuals with the Division of Budget for the governor's office. And ultimately the governor will be reviewing that, and then the governor makes recommendations on every state agency's budget. And those are going to be released basically around the first or second week in January at the very beginning of legislative session. So our information has been submitted. There were no big increases based on what would have been submitted last year. We did make several adjustments based on continuing issues related to the pandemic. We moved some planned expenditures between different categories. Not as much in-state travel, going to speak at different events, more of those things on Zoom. But just different changes like that. So the budget has been submitted, shouldn't be significantly more than we had already estimated. And then an element on that too, the revenue that came in for this fiscal year that just ended was a little bit above what had been previously estimated. So overall, the agency's expenditures do exceed revenue, and that is by design. The board did lower fees about 2 years ago, or that's when it began in 2019. And that was in an effort in part to decrease the balance in the fee fund. So the agency is still in very sound financial shape, and we will continue to make you aware of budget items as we move forward on that. We also did, we were asked to submit an update for the agency's strategic 3-year IT plan, and that has been submitted. A couple things just to let you know that we're looking at for the future. This past year, we started the process of replacing some of the agency's computers. So in the past, we had purchased some of those computers. We have now moved towards a leasing program called Desktop as a Service through the state. And that provides some additional resources and better technology through the state. And so we're planning to be on a schedule with more of those. We're testing out, we have about 3 right now. And so as long as those continue to operate really well, we probably will move forward and replace those on a rotational basis moving forward. We also have a number of paper records in our office as part of the 3-year IT plan. We included some information about some plans to go ahead and try to convert a number of those papers into electronic records. That's probably going to be a pretty big undertaking. So I think we're going to have to move forward on it over a series of years. But I think it'll be really helpful once we do that because we won't need so much storage space. And I think it'll be easier to recall records, and that will be more helpful overall. In terms of some operations updates, so the governor's office had, after about May, had directed state employees back into state offices full-time. That was to take effect on June 14th. And for about 2 months, that did operate that way. On August 25th, we were directed to have most employees return to working primarily from home and doing remote work. And so we did go ahead and implement some policies to move most employees back to working primarily from home. We have a rotating schedule. So we were asked to continue operations here in the office too, but we sort of have a bare bones staff in the office, and then most of the staff is working from home. So that is causing a few issues, but we did purchase some additional technology to try to make the at-home remote experience for the employees a little bit closer to what they do have here in the office. Initially, that was through October 4th. That has recently been extended through the end of October. So we will have to continue to monitor that, but that is through the direction of the governor's office and the Department of Administration. So we will look at that, and that is due to the COVID variant and concerns about the COVID numbers here in the state. And so we'll try to support our staff and make sure that they can work productively with remote work. We had a member of our licensing team resign about a month ago, and we have been in the process of seeking permission to fill that spot, which we obtained. We submitted a position description and advertised for that position, and that window has just closed. So we will be setting up interviews with the individuals who applied for that position. We hope to have somebody in very soon, and then we can start training them up to serve some of the administrative roles and some of the licensing work as well. We are also working on bringing somebody in part-time due to the passage of the bill, House Bill 2066, which involved military members and military spouses and some select other individuals applying for reciprocity. That has been a little more challenging in the creation of a new position, but we are moving forward with it. And potentially, if we have the right candidate for this administrative role that we're hiring, potentially we could find someone else who could fit this part-time position, and possibly we could hire them both at once. But otherwise, we would be advertising for this new position coming up. A few other updates. The board recently met, and generally the board has a one-day, all-day planning meeting once a year, sometimes called the board retreat. It tends to be off-site. However, the board had planned to have it the weekend of September 26th and 27th. There's going to be starting on Sunday evening and then an all-day meeting on the 27th, Monday. Due to concerns about the COVID-19 variant, we were not able to hold the meeting in person. But the board had a discussion about that at the last board meeting in September, and they recommended go ahead and splitting that meeting and having it over 2 days and doing that over Zoom. So the first day did occur on September 27th, and the board had discussion about a number of different topics. The board does have a follow-up meeting at the end of October. And so at that time, they'll be deciding legislative priorities and trying to decide what items to move forward on with the bill, or if there's any regulatory language that would need to be adjusted. So that was helpful. One of the items the board is currently looking at right now is the board governance policy, and that is a policy that was last adopted by the board back in 2011. The governance policy is in the process of being updated and reviewed by the board. So they had asked me at the September meeting to go ahead and look for items in the governance policy, and then to provide some potential changes or at least items for the board to review and decide if they want to keep those items in the governance policy. So I put together an 8-page report for the board to review those items, and they're currently in the process of looking at that language. And I think they might, if they feel comfortable moving ahead, they might make some decisions on changes at the October meeting, or otherwise it might come up at the next board meeting, which would be in November. And then otherwise, we are moving forward with working with the different advisory committees on different items. Some of the items on your agenda are things that the other advisory committees are commenting on as well. So if you have any questions when we get to those items, just let me know and I'd be happy to share what the other advisory committees are working on. We are also coming up to some end of the year type meetings for some of the different professions. One of them that's coming up here very shortly is one for licensed psychologists. ASPPB is also one for the Social Work Association that I believe is coming up in November. So I'll be attending those meetings virtually. Those have previously been scheduled to happen in person. And then just one other item too, I was out of the office a few days on a short vacation earlier this week. So I'll be playing a little bit of catch up if there's any items that you had sent. I'll be following up with you if you had sent a message here recently. So just wanted to update you on a few of those items and open it up if you have any questions on any of the recent activity of things that we have been working on here in the staff. Also, before I do open it up, I did want to compliment our staff. Our staff is working under some very difficult circumstances right now with being a little bit short-staffed and also working remotely. And so I do want to applaud the work that our staff is doing. They're working very hard trying to make sure that we can continue to get individuals licensed. And so I see how hard they're working, and I want you to know that they are working as hard as they can to make sure that things run smoothly with these difficulties. So.
David, thank you so much. And yes, thanks. Please extend a thank you to the staff. I know on a regular day you work so hard, so I can't even imagine what it's like right now. So thank you so much on behalf of the committee. Does anybody have any questions for David or Leslie? Okay. Has Elaine jumped on?
I do not see her yet.
Okay, so we'll come back to the minutes. And then, well, it's time to review applicants. Can we do that? Well, I guess we can do it, but we can't really make a recommendation until Elaine jumps on. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can start the process by just kind of talking about some of the mechanics of this process. And then before you make any official recommendations, as long as there's 4 recommendations, that should be fine.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, so you should have a couple of different items in your materials for the meeting today. I'll just walk through a couple of those things. One of them has a title, Advisory Committees for the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. And the second document, it says Professional Counseling Advisory Committee, length of service for non-board members. And so just to let you know, the governance policy for the advisory committees, it does indicate that members can serve on the advisory committee no more than 4 2-year terms. And on the Professional Counseling Advisory Committee, went ahead and just Leslie Allen ran the numbers for how many years individuals have served. And so we do have 3 members who have come up on the 8 years or more that have helped out with the advisory committee, and we appreciate their work. Those 3 members are Kenneth Huey, and Gary Price, and Elaine. And so wanted to highlight those 3 individuals and then kind of walk through some of the different items here on the document that describes more of the advisory committee processes. So looking back on that advisory committee handout, the advisory committee's purpose is to support the board in carrying out its mission and protecting the public. The actions that the advisory committee looks at includes informing, licensing, and the disciplines under the persons regulated by the board. There are advisory committees for each of the 7 professions that are regulated by the BSRB. In terms of the structure, according to the governance policy, the chairperson is the advisory committee member, is a board member licensed in the relevant discipline of the advisory committee. And there is also a public member of the board who is also a member. And then the Board governance policy indicates that there was a minimum of 3 additional members that are appointed to the advisory committee. And it's important to note that the board governance policy says that there should be at least 3 non-board members on the advisory committee, but it doesn't indicate a maximum number on the advisory committee. So it has been talked about that maybe 10 would be a good limit, but the board governance policy doesn't really indicate a maximum. It does indicate the executive director is a non-voting member, and then it indicates that the licensing manager and assistant attorney general are encouraged to attend the advisory committee meetings. In terms of the terms, as I mentioned, members can serve no more than 4 2-year terms. The appointments should be staggered. One item when looking at candidates, it's important to know that the policies and procedures under which the BSRB board members are expected to operate will also apply to the advisory committee members. And part of those policies are referenced in the board governance policy, including things like avoiding conflict of interest and being ethical in certain ways and avoiding any kind of issues. So those should be something to keep in mind when you are evaluating candidates. Additionally, for selection, it indicates that the advisory committees, it indicates that anyone can be nominated for consideration as long as they are licensed in the profession. But that what we did in this case is we sent a letter to licensees and we asked for them to self-nominate if they wish to be in consideration to join the advisory committees. It indicates the discussion of the advisory committee candidates will be in a public meeting, and that when advisory committee members are looking to make recommendations, they should ensure that there is representation based on geographical, gender, and public versus private settings. And then the members should provide representation to the levels of licensure for the discipline. And it is suggested that those members be selected from among the public and private practitioners and educators. As I mentioned, the discussions are held in committee of the whole in an open meeting. The chairperson of the advisory committee will submit the names of those individuals that are recommended. And so when you recommend individuals to join the advisory committee, that information will be delivered to the chair of the board. And the chairperson of the board has the authority to add members to the advisory committee. And they can request input before making a decision. And then the chairperson of the BSRB can add or remove members. And then it gives some other information here that says the executive director will inform the advisory committee appointee by letter. And then the executive director may assist the new members by providing information that will help orient the new member to both the board and the advisory committee's roles and functions. So other advisory committees have discussed candidates and have reached consensus on members. They have also done a process where if they came down to a few members, they have used a voting process to determine members. So there's really not a strict guidelines in terms of which process to use, just that it has to be in an open meeting for discussion purposes. And then you would reach recommendations on individuals to join the advisory committee. Do you have any questions on anything from the handout in terms of any of those different things? I just want to reference to you did receive copies of the materials for the individuals who applied for consideration. There were 16 individuals who applied for consideration, and those were sent to the members of the advisory committees back on August 9th. So hopefully you've had a chance to review all the information that those individuals have submitted for consideration. I did go ahead and go through to verify that the individuals had a current license under the BSRB. And so I went ahead on the emails that you received, I put in parentheses their level of licensure. And then if they had any other licenses in a non-professional counseling category, I noted those for your consideration as well. So do you have any questions on those materials that were provided for you?
I do have one question. What month do people go off? I mean, like the people that have been, because this is my 8th year. So what month do I go off?
I'll go off next year.
Yes. So generally, that's one thing we're kind of working on a little in terms of when the terms end. It does seem there should be 4 2-year terms. But in the past, some of those terms have together. And that's why, for Gary, for example, 9 years instead of 8 years. But in general, would start terms would begin and end at the beginning of the fiscal year, July. And so now sometimes didn't on the advisory committee, then it just kind of continued. But what we're trying to do is start of the fiscal year for some of those changes.
Thank you.
And also, David, a question I have, how many candidates did other committees receive? As I understand it, we received a lot more than other committees. Is that correct?
Mostly, yeah. So there's all but one of the committees had individuals who were coming off of the based on how long they were. And so a few of the other ones received about 6 applicants, and then made recommendations to add 2, maybe 3.
Okay.
Then the addiction counseling, licensed psychology, level psych that have reached recommendation. They did have about 6 to 7 applicants.
Okay.
Which quite a bit more. The group that had the most social work had close to about 30 applicants who had applied for. So they're high end of the spectrum, and we were next in line. Most of the groups who applied for consideration.
Okay. It seems to me like first we should decide who rolls off and when. And so we can then plan a process to add new committee members that we can follow. Ken, it sounds like you will roll off next summer. Does that sound accurate?
Well, I guess I was taking it would be now, if they're going to come on, it would have been July. I take it, since it's already 8.
Right.
And I
So
think Gary would have been the same way, and maybe Elaine.
So 3 So as soon as we can choose 3 new candidates, then you can roll off Gary and Elaine right away. It sounds like, and then next year we would replace Kenton in July.
Correct. And you could get sent out next year, or what some of the committees are doing is they're looking at the candidates to apply time for potential consideration in the future as well. So you
Okay. So replace 3 now and then 2 next summer, and maybe 2 every year from here on out. We'll start a precedent of selecting 2 new people.
that's something.
Oh, you're cutting out, darn it. David, what did you say?
Yes, that is a method that you could use to kind of make sure that there is staggering. And if, sometimes individuals do decide to move, or something else changes where they need to step down from an advisory committee. So you could also take that into consideration if you needed to add somebody because of that reason too.
So I'd like to get feedback from the committee members. Does that sound like a good plan? 3 now and then 2 every year.
I think, I guess the one thing about 2 every year, I think that committee members have been asked at times whether they choose to continue. So I don't know that there would be 2 every year if someone chooses to continue. Just a thought, because the terms are.
The terms are 2 years.
So it wouldn't be necessarily 2 new every year unless you're replacing people who are up. Is that correct?
That makes sense.
Unless you want to add more people.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, to make it a little bigger at first, maybe do that next year so that it will grow, and then decide every year after that. When would be the best time of year to do that survey to find out if people plan to return so that we can select as needed?
Yeah, I think maybe sometime in the spring, maybe sometime around April or so.
Okay.
Yeah, what we're doing right now is a little bit of reconciliation. Like I said, the past committee members had run together, and like I mentioned, the board policy heavily dated since about 2000. So we're trying to, make the board members and the advisory committee members aware of some of the things that have been in the policy for a few years now, while the board is looking at, continuing these things or making changes. But since this is currently in the policy, we wanted to bring this to the advisory committee and make you aware of what it said, and so you can go ahead and the goal, I think, is to whereas board members, you have 2 4-year terms, and at the end of your first 4-year term, the governor would reappoint somebody. So I think in theory, when your 2-year term ends, the chair of the board would essentially reappoint you to the advisory committee, which has kind of been what is happening. We're just trying to formalize that process and make it a little more transparent. So we're kind of cleaning things up a little bit.
Thank you. So as I understand it, we're saying, let's go ahead and select 3 candidates now. And then in the spring, we'll do a survey to find out who's staying, who's rolling off, and then we'll adjust accordingly for selections for next year. Is that what I understand we are going to do?
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Any other feedback from anybody or ideas to do something different? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. So let's go ahead and talk about our candidates. So we need to choose 3 people out of 16 resumes, CVs. David, any ideas about how to start this process? Is there anything specific formally that we need to do?
There's not a formal way to do. I can tell you what some advisory committees have done. Some of them, like let's say that if you were looking at filling 3 spots, like your committee is looking at, you could ask the members of the advisory committee potentially who were candidates that stuck out to them, or maybe who were their top 3 candidates, and then see if you have a consensus overlapping between the members. But that's a good way to kind of have a discussion starting point, especially with so many members. That could be a good way to start.
Okay. Well, then let's do that. Does anybody have any feedback about candidates that really stood out?
Oh, and Laura,
go ahead.
One other item I just wanted to mention too. I mentioned in the board governance policy, it does indicate that there should be representation across the state or geographic area. So I just kind of wanted to highlight the cities. This is on the board's website, but individuals who are remaining on the advisory committee, but cities that they. So Andrew's tour is in Spring Hill and Kenton. It looks like you are in Hayes, and Bob Kircher is in Lawrence. So just wanted to mention those so you can keep those in mind when you're looking at locations of other practitioners.
Thank you for that.
That's kind of what I was going to talk about too. I really don't have 3, but I would like to have Michelle Fairbank considered, since Elaine and I will be going off soon. And I think Elaine and I are the only 2 in Western Kansas. I think Elaine's in the Colby area, and I'm in Hayes. So, and Michelle's in private practice. She does teach adjunct at Fort Hayes.
Okay.
And she's an LCPC and a supervisor as well.
Okay.
So, but other than that, I just want to make sure when I go off and Elaine goes off, Western Kansas has some representation.
Absolutely. Thank you. We also had, let me find my Great Bend person. Who is here from Great Bend? Rachel Hemken. Does anybody know her? She's in Great Bend, Kansas.
Yeah, I saw that too. I do not know her.
She was educated at Fort Hays State. So, and it looks like she's done all of her work out Western Kansas.
Well, it can't be all bad if she was educated at Fort Hays State.
There you go. Anybody else stand out to mention? I didn't look at where Bel Air, Kansas is. Does anybody know where Bel Air, Kansas is? What? Does anyone else have anybody to mention or to recommend specifically? I also really, 27 pages from Adil Torres, Rivera. One thing about that, Wichita, Kansas, obviously very academic focused. Any ideas about him or feedback about him?
Yeah, I think I've read through his, and I know of him historically. So even though he's new to Kansas,
Mhm.
he is nationally known. He would be one that on my list.
He would be on your list.
Yes.
Well, I don't know him, but it seems to me metropolitan area. I mean, if it's Wichita, and I didn't note that, but since you said it was Wichita, it makes sense to me to have someone from an area like that.
Yeah. Okay.
And the other one that I read about was Harriet Bachner. Bachner. And she's from Pittsburgh, I believe.
Right.
Yeah, I believe she retired from Pittsburgh State. That's what I wrote down anyway.
Oh,
Yeah. Professor Emeritus, Pittsburgh State. Yeah. University of North Texas. So any other feedback about Harriet Bachner? Or anyone else? All three of these are academic focused. Were there any private practice people that stood out?
Well, Michelle Fairbank is private practice. The one I suggested for names.
Right. Forgot about that. Was she academic at first and then became private practice?
No, she teaches adjunct for us, but she's never been
Oh, okay.
full-time professor.
So private practice has always been her main focus. Thank you for clarifying that. Well, anybody else have any recommendations that really stand out? As it stands, we have 3 right now. I don't want to really not give anybody else a chance, but 3, it seems like stood right out. So do we need to go farther with this, or do you feel like we have 3 good candidates and we're okay with what we've chosen?
I thought there were 4 mentioned. Were there not? Michelle, Rachel, Harriet, and Adele, or how it's pronounced.
I mentioned Rachel, but I didn't really hear a strong statement about her.
Okay. Then it's 3. I take that to be.
So any other questions or feedback at all? Was it really this easy? I read through 16 resumes not knowing if it would be easy.
the other one that I had on my list was Jessica Allison. I think she's from maybe Southeast as well.
Where is she? Let's see.
Yeah, Fort Scott is what I have written down for her.
Yeah. She has an MS in community counseling and a bachelor's in psych. He's an Army veteran. And we can really do what we want. If we decide that we have 4 strong candidates, we can recommend them. We certainly have room to expand. So that is another thing that we could do. And I'm actually very open to and encouraging of that because I am a huge fan of more voices. So that's another thing we could do. Any feedback about that?
Or how are we doing with geographical significance?
Well, that's what I was going to say too, Bob. When I go off, maybe we could consider Rachel from Great Bend. So we'd have 2 in Western Kansas. Since you brought her up, Laura.
Okay.
Because if Elaine and I go off and we have Michelle come on, it would just be her.
Okay. And next year is not too far away. I mean, we're really talking, half a year. So what would we do in that case, David? Would we we really wouldn't notify her now. We would just ask her about it next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine, but you may want to go ahead, identify that now, and then just, go ahead and reach out to people in the future when you're ready to look at adding more members.
Okay, so are we saying that we will consider these 4 candidates now and then reach back out again in the spring, but consider Rachel for Western Kansas in the spring? Is that what we're saying we will do?
Well, and I think in order to make recommendations, you need to have 1 more member present.
Right.
So I thought I would check to see if she's on the phone. We do have the conference call open, but it sounds like she is not on the call. So it sounds like you've had a good discussion of candidates, but in order to officially, probably need 1 more member of the advisory committee. So I know committee who had to leave at 11. So if you don't have enough members to make recommendations, try to schedule a real quick follow-up meeting for you all in the future for the process of making recommendations. Hate to have another meeting, but if we don't have enough members, we can't really make recommendations on them today. So
We probably can't vote via email, can we?
no, it'd probably have to be in an open meeting just because the discussions would need to take place that way. So.
Okay.
David, am I allowed to contact Elaine or Andrew, anybody that wasn't here, and talk to them about these candidates, or does that need to stay in the open meeting?
So the open meeting only becomes an issue if there's a majority of members of the committee discussing a matter outside of the committee. So it's fine if you want to talk to a member or 2 of the advisory committee. I would just make sure to keep that to just, for that less than half the members. So yeah, it should be fine to go ahead and talk. Make sure that those discussions don't move forward into involving more members.
So I'm sorry, my Zoom is echoing. I'm so sorry. So in the effort to keep that second meeting efficient, would it be appropriate for me to contact them, let them know some of the decisions that we've made to make sure, to give them an opportunity to add more at our second meeting? Or
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I don't step over the line as far as coma.
Sure. And everything that happens broadcast, so this is all public. So is anybody can discuss, members can go back and go back. That's not an issue. So yeah.
Okay.
Meeting doesn't evolve.
My goal would be that, they could be brought up to speed so that when the next meeting would be efficient and we could really make a decision and vote.
That sounds good.
Okay, great. So will you do a survey, a doodle survey, and find a time when we can all get together to vote about this specific topic?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time and for working through this process. It was a lot easier than I thought it would be, but I'm glad that we got it done. So I'll contact the members who are absent and explain to them how far we got, and that we'll carry it further when we meet again. Is there anything else we need to do on this topic right now? David?
No.
Okay.
I think, Laura, I think I'll go ahead and hop off before you get into something else, so I don't have to disrupt people. So,
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
absolutely.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let me find my agenda that is buried under all of these resumes. Okay, here we go. Oh, we're back. We're down to old business.
Yeah, and for
David,
that
would
first,
you like to cover?
Sure. First item, membership, I kind of meshed that together with the discussion on members of the advisory committee. One thing I just want to highlight here for old business was, and Elaine just entered the room, so I'll go ahead and let her. Yes.
I'm gonna
Hello,
go see if she's
welcome.
gone for a few minutes.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome. There she is.
Sorry, guys, but we got it taken care of. Brook 184. I'm gonna go to my car, so I won't bother anybody.
Do I see a beach?
No, we're out at tennis courts.
That's
I
a good
wish
way.
you saw a beach.
Well, we'll take tennis courts. Welcome and thank you for your time.
Sorry.
And Leslie Allen is trying to get a hold of Kenton to see if he can just hop back in the meeting for a second. So then you have enough members to make a recommendation if you feel comfortable doing that. But you want to kind of summarize the discussion you've had so far on the advisory committee members, the candidates?
Sure, Elaine. We did a very efficient job of coming up with 4 recommendations for advisory committee members. And what we decided to do, we have 3 people rolling off as soon as possible. They're past their tenure, one of them being you, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And then, so we narrowed it down to 4 candidates now. We can expand. So even though 3 of you would roll off right away, we have 4 that we can add. We can add as many as we want, really. And so we've chosen 4 people and then a plan to add an additional person next year out in Western Kansas to make sure that there's representation out west. David, should I name those candidates now?
Sure, that'd be fine.
Okay, so Michelle Fairbanks, she's at Fort Hayes in private practice. Adil Torres Rivera, he's in Wichita. Harriet Bachner in Pittsburgh, and then Jessica Allen in Fort Scott. Those are the 4 that we narrowed it down to.
Okay.
Do you have any feedback or additions to that process?
No, I looked through all those and I didn't bring them, but they were on my computer. And, I think we really want to make sure we key in on people that are going to be involved in the organization.
Yeah.
As well as responsible for attending the meetings. So.
Right.
Okay. And Kenton just joined the meeting. You have enough members to make a recommendation.
So I need a motion from a member to make a recommendation to adopt these 4 candidates and we'll recommend them to the board chair. Do I need to say their names out loud again?
Go ahead and say their names one more time, just for clarity.
Okay. Thank you. So I need a motion to nominate Michelle Fairbanks, Adil Torres Rivera, Harriet Bachner, and Jessica Allen as candidates for the Professional Counselors Advisory Committee. Do I have a motion?
I so moved.
I'll
Kenton
second.
made- And so Kenton made the motion and Robert Kirchner seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Okay, I don't hear any objections, so the motion carries, and we will make the recommendation for those four to the board chair. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for getting that done. Got some new energy to work with. This is going to be exciting, although we're losing some pretty seasoned, solid people, which we'll miss you.
Okay, I'm gonna hop back off now.
Thank you, Ken.
You're
Thanks,
welcome. Thanks for calling, Leslie.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, you guys. Thank you so much for that. I'm glad we got that done. Okay, so shall we go back to old business?
Yes.
Okay, David Fye. What do you want to cover first? Retention and disposal of records?
Sure. Let's talk about this old business, item B, retention disposal of records in case of a death of a provider. And I just wanted to make you aware of the update. So as I mentioned earlier, there was the planning meeting, the annual planning meeting for the board, and they discussed this topic at length. It's a question about the board wanted to move forward on this item to include some language which would essentially add this as a responsibility under the professional conduct, professional responsibilities, regulatory language. And so they asked us to write up some language for them to review at the second day of the annual planning meeting, so that they can consider going ahead and moving forward with adopting that. So we'll look at some similar language the Board of Healing Arts uses, because they have an actual statute for this topic, and then we'll bring it back for that meeting at the end of October. If they do decide to move forward with the statutory language, kind of like the Board of Healing Arts, that would be something that would go into a bill before the 2022 legislature. If they would just like to move forward with changing the regulatory language, that's something that we could move forward without a bill. But one item they did talk about was and just to kind of walk through the process here. So the idea would be that you need to establish and make it very clear to practitioners that this is a responsibility to have someone designated as the custodian of your records should you pass away unexpectedly, or for whatever reason, should your records become abandoned or something like that. So in that case, there would be a next logical custodian that had been already identified to take possession of those records and handle things like requests for records and things like that. And so we wanted to present it in such a way where the board could make it very clear to practitioners this is their responsibility to go ahead and have something in place for that. And then once that was in place, then as a way of enforcing that, then we could move forward with adding something to the applications, most likely the renewal applications, to have practitioners indicate who is the custodian of their records, and work on the logistics of that. But the first thing is to make sure that it is something that is practitioners know is an expectation and a requirement for them as professional conduct, and then to go ahead and move forward on how that can be enforced after it's added. So right now, the board is asking us to put together some language for their review, and that'll be something they look at the end of October.
Any questions or feedback about that? No? Okay. All right. The next one, advisory committee membership. Anything else we need to do?
Nope. So that was just another comment, just to make sure that the individuals had reached the end of their service. But I can give you an update item consideration of CE requirements. So the advisory committee had previously discussed consideration of continuing education requirements and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And a lot of the other advisory committees had discussed that topic too. Two different advisory committees, the licensed psychology and the social work advisory committee had received separate requests to look into those topics and consider changing the requirements, either to add 3 hours or maybe to make an adjustment where you decrease the number of hours in another category that's required. Currently, for most of the higher level of licensees, they're required to get 3 hours of ethics every licensure cycle and then 6 hours in diagnosis and treatment. There was a discussion about, well, for those practitioners, should you decrease the hours of diagnosis and treatment, increase the hours in this category? The board had a discussion and talked about several different options. One item they wanted to bring back for the advisory committees to discuss was what if you required equity and inclusion? You could require 3 hours in that category, but you could allow individuals to essentially overlap if they found 3 hours that also qualified for ethics, or you found 3 hours that also qualified for diagnosis and treatment. So you wouldn't have to do main discussion points was board members were concerned about requiring specific categories because it might limit the number of hours practitioners could seek in other areas, specifically towards their. So that was what they asked the advisory committee to do. Would you be in favor of requirements of hours, diversity, equity, and inclusion, specifically if you could overlap that for ethics or the.
Hi, we're getting feedback.
It's probably my computer. I'll just stay on mute. So any feedback for David and Leslie?
What were the areas that would be overlapped or could be overlapped?
Currently, there's a requirement of 3 hours in ethics. So if individuals had 3 hours in ethics that also counted for that category, that would be fine under this scenario. Or for a lot of the advanced level degree or advanced level licenses, there's a requirement of 6 hours in diagnosis and treatment. So if you found something that qualified for diagnosis and treatment and also qualified for the diversity, equity, and inclusion, that would be something that would be allowed under this too. Currently, right now, the BSRB does not allow overlapping of categories. So if you had something that might qualify for ethics and qualify for diagnosis and treatment, we would need it to be separate. So we would look for, do you have the 3 hours of ethics? Okay, here are your 3 hours of ethics. And then what other hours are you using to satisfy the diagnosis and treatment? So this ability to overlap would be something new, but it would be a way to not have more than 9 hours required. The other thing is for some of the lower level licenses that don't have the ability to diagnose, then they don't have that 6 hour requirement. And so this would be something where it could overlap with ethics or potentially it could be by itself. So.
And as I understand it, the overlap is only for DEI, diversity, equity, inclusivity. Everything else stays the same, but this can layer on top of diagnosis and treatment or ethics.
Right. So, yeah, so it wouldn't be a replacement and you wouldn't be able to overlap the ethics and the diagnosis and treatment. It would just be a new requirement, but you would be able to use this for this if you found something that qualified.
So any other questions or feedback? No? Okay. The considerations were at the board level, definitely the importance of DEI topics and a balancing with not becoming too prescriptive for all the CEs. So this seemed like a way to accomplish both. David, anything else you want to add about that?
No, just the board will continue that conversation when they come back for the second day of those meetings in late October.
Great. Thank you. now update on the Ottawa program review.
And this is something that we have, so there program for Ottawa that we have asked members of the advisory committee to look at, and hopefully you might be able to talk a little.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure. So Bob and Kenneth were working doing that. And I know that Ken had asked me to request more information, but I wanted to make sure that Bob didn't want more than that. And understanding is that I need to go back to Ottawa and ask them to complete the questionnaire and answer every question. That's what's missing, correct?
I'm really getting a lot of feedback now. Leslie, I didn't get everything you.
So you want me to request that Ottawa fill out the questionnaire again and answer every question because they didn't answer every question? Is that correct?
Well, yeah,
Yes, I think
there's a lot of detail that was left off that's really key to whether they meet that requirement or not.
Okay.
I think the process is more substantive than those materials would indicate. And by that, I mean, the just referring to a document, I think is not sufficient. If you take a look at, and I think I sent some to you, Leslie, previous ones that other institutions did, and
Right.
those were substantive. This one wasn't similar to those in any way. And so I think it's rather than just a completion of the form, it involves becoming kind of a self-study, and they present the results of the self-study for whoever will review it next.
And the reality is that that's what every other program has had to do that we've approved as a program. So.
Okay. I will get that taken care of. I just wanted to make sure you guys both wanted the same information. I didn't want to ask and then come back and ask again.
Sure.
Well, I just, I don't know how to get the message that about what's involved in the process, but it just seems it takes substantive more information to be able to make the decision. And I don't believe the reviewer should just have to hunt through the information to obtain it.
I think part of that confusion may be because the staff used to hunt through things to find all the answers. Now we've kind of clamped down, but in the past that was done. So I'll make sure that they understand it's a self-study and they need to answer all the questions and then refer to the documents to back up what they say. Thank you guys both.
Sure.
Thank you. So any other old business, David, that we need to cover?
Nope.
Okay, new business. Thinking of expiration dates for licensees. My question to Leslie and David was this going to make your job easier? Because I always like thinking that, we're going to make things easier, and I didn't like the answer I got. So go ahead and talk about it, please, if you would.
Okay. So I'll kind of give you a little bit of a background for how this item started. So there are individuals, one thing that makes the BSRB a little unique is that there are individuals who hold a license in more than one of the professions regulated by the BSRB. So you have individuals who, for example, might have an addiction counselor license and a professional counselor license, or different things like that. But based on when they received their license, that kind of sets the expiration date for that license. And so we have individuals who have asked if they could move one of the expiration dates so that they both come up at the same time. And the issue is that in statute, it says how long the term of licensure lasts. And so we're not able to extend that amount of time, but we're also really not able to decrease that amount of time, even if somebody wanted to forfeit, a certain period, because statutorily it's a 2-year licensure cycle. And so we're not able to just make them come up at the same time unless somebody gets them both at the same time and is approved for them both together. So in looking at the number of individuals who hold licenses under the BSRB, there's about 14,100 licenses, but there's about 13,000 licensees. So there's about 1,000 or 1,100 people who hold more than one license. And the question was, should we look at providing a way that individuals could have their licenses come up at the same time? B, is this something that those individuals would really be supportive of? And if so, should we change the statutes to make that happen? And some of the pros and cons, one of the pros would be, trying to make sure that you don't miss your deadline for paying for licensure, because they would both come up at the same time. Making sure your continuing education hours are always in the right place when you need those hours to be completed for your licensure renewal. One of the cons is that you may not want to have the bill for both of those license renewals the same month. You may want to spread that out, or there may be other factors involved too. And so one thing the board asked is they asked if the advisory committees could have a discussion, sort of representing the different professions, to see, as advisory committee members, do you think the profession would be supportive of something that would allow individuals to be able to sync up their expiration dates? From our perspective as the agency, it really wouldn't change a lot of what we do to continue what we're doing right now. Having them come up at the same time really wouldn't make things more efficient for us. It's really just more of if members want that, and we don't know how many of that group actually would want that, but if they would, are you interested in providing an option statutorily that would allow us to have somebody essentially forfeit a little period of their time so that we can set the expiration together?
Any feedback on that?
I do have a question for those 1,100 people or whoever we're talking about, however many we're talking about. When their licenses come due, do they have to show how is the continuing education computed within that? I don't know if I'm asking a logical question or not. It's logical in my mind, but I'm not sure I'm asking in a logical way.
It has to be 2 years immediately, within 2 years immediately prior to when you renew your license. So whichever license you're renewing, it would have to be within 2 years. So you could make it work.
So Bob, your question, do people lose time or lose CEUs if the time is too short?
Well, and I was also wondering, they are required to have, they can't overlap as far as requirements, correct?
You mean CEs count for both licenses?
Right.
Yes, they can overlap. The big, I guess, issue is if it's an addiction counselor license. Some things may be some addictions very pertinent to LPCs. Not everything an LPC does would be acceptable for the addiction counselor. But for the other professions, it's not so specific.
Right.
So they can overlap.
Kenneth, I believe you had a comment.
And that was my question, but they overlap now anyway, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so one idea was to send something out to the 1,100 people to see what their preferences would be, but the board decided to go ahead and just have the advisory committees discuss this topic and see, do you think professional counsel committees would be in favor of having that option? Or is this something that may not be something that individuals might be interested in? So.
I think there will be people that will definitely be interested in taking advantage of this. And, because it's really not a net gain for the two of you, for the board, or not for the board, but for the agency, it sounds like really workload wise, it doesn't change your work, but it might make it more efficient for a group of people who go through this process twice within, a certain time frame. So I like the idea of giving the option. Anybody else?
Well, opening up the discussion with them is a good point.
So Elaine, you're in favor of doing a survey or really reaching out and asking?
Yes.
Okay. And then getting feedback and discovering how many people would be impacted. Anyone else? So David, are other committees doing the same thing? Are they surveying their people about dual licensure?
Yeah, so that they're going to be discussing this as well. I think you are the first advisory committee that's met after that last board meeting. So
Okay.
they'll be asked to comment and weigh in on this topic.
Okay. So what would this survey be? Would it be an email, or how would we gather the data?
Well, see, I think there was a preference to do an email because of how many individuals it involves. Some of our other polling tools like Doodle Poll have a limit of about 50 people or so. So we'd have to get a little more creative on how we would poll those members, but that is something that we could explore in terms of having a poll for a group that large.
And then you just give them options. Here are the choices before you, and see if they had feedback about, one specific one, or choosing one.
Yeah, that could be, would they be interested in doing this if it were an option,
Can you repeat that again? We got a lot of feedback right there.
Sure. Yeah, one idea could be to just ask them, if this were in place, would you do it? And then maybe have different options in terms of, different ways to do it. But the ultimate question is really, if this were in place, is there a real need for this, or a real desire to change things? How many of the category would actually be interested in doing something like that?
So if you send out a survey like that, then you could report back the data that you receive.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like me to be the person to look at that data?
We could probably do that. Just let me explore a little bit more into our polling option.
Okay. So what we're saying is, you're going to do that survey, you're going to get that data, and then we'll look at it and bring it back to the committee so they can really understand what the will of the LPCs are out there.
Yeah, and I'll try to figure out a way to do that for this profession.
Okay, thank you. Any other feedback from anybody about that? Okay, thank you so much. And so now I'm going to go back up to meeting minutes. Do we have enough people now to approve the meeting minutes? I don't think we do we? Because we gained one and lost one.
Yeah, when Kenton left, so you don't have enough to approve the minutes. You can carry those forward to the next meeting if you want to go ahead.
Okay, all right, okay. So I think that covers our agenda. Are there any other things that I missed or skipped over that we need to cover?
I don't think so.
I don't either. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for your time this morning, and thank you so much for selecting candidates for our advisory committee. That went much easier than I thought it would, so I'm really glad we got that done. It's so important. I need a motion to adjourn.
Actually,
I so moved.
you just go ahead and end the meeting, please.
So we don't need a motion
Oh.
for that?
Yeah.
Sorry, my bad. Okay, I guess the meeting is adjourned.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to Elaine.
Aha.
Enjoy your tennis.
Will